Dear friends, let us continue our reading and study of the Gospel of John. Today we are in the 5th chapter, and let's remember we are still in the book of signs. We have already seen two signs that Jesus performed, both at Cana. The first sign, Jesus changing water into wine, and the second sign, again in Cana, Jesus healing an official's son. Today we come to the third sign that Jesus performs, and he does that by healing a man who is sick for 38 years near the pool of Bethsaida. And what is more important for us to consider is that he does this miracle, does this sign on a Sabbath day. Now, fidelity to Sabbath was something of utmost importance for the Jewish people. The sanctity of the Sabbath day. It's enough for us to read Isaiah 58, 13 and 14. Jeremiah 17, 19 to 27, etc. will speak to us a lot about the sanctity of the Sabbath. Now, the restrictions on the Sabbath, what could be done on Sabbath, what should not be done on Sabbath, etc., increased over the years. And at the time of Jesus, it is said that there were some 40 things that a Jew could not do on a Sabbath. Now that was the situation, that is the context in which Jesus performs this miracle. He does this sign on a Sabbath day. Now this chapter 5 could be divided into three sections. First of all, from verse 1 to 15, we have this miracle, this sign, this healing. From 16 to 30, we find the authority of Jesus questioned, and Jesus explains his authority. And 31 to the end of the chapter, 47, verse 47, we have the testimony to Jesus. Now, in the Synoptic Gospels, we find many healings effected by Jesus, done by Jesus, performed by Jesus. And most of those healings are out of great compassion that Jesus has for people. Whereas here in this episode, in chapter 5, when Jesus heals this person on the Sabbath, much more than compassion, Jesus in very clear-cut terms is telling that he as the Son of God, he as God is above the Sabbath. And it's only God was given that exception to work on a Sabbath. God continues to work on the Sabbath. And what is the work of God? God gives life and he judges. And we find that very interestingly, we find in verse 17, when Jesus would say, "My Father is still working and I also am working." So in this episode, when he heals this person, he's telling, just as Father is working, God is working, so too I am working and I am above the Sabbath. And thus Jesus is equating himself with God, and then in very clear terms, he is speaking of his relationship with God. The Son is with the Father, and the Son and the Father. That relationship is very clearly explained in this miracle. Coming to the second section, the authority of the Son, Jesus would say that the Son shares not only in the essence of the Father, but also in the work of the Father. And as I said, the principal work of the Father that is shown here is that of giving life and of judging. And Father has given this authority to Son. Now the evangelist very clearly showing to us the relationship of the Father and the Son. Already that was spoken of in the prologue when John had said, the Word was with God and the Word was God. And finally, in the third section of this chapter 5, we have witnesses to Jesus. Now the Mosaic law demanded at least 2 witnesses for any cause to be justified. If you read Deuteronomy 17 verse 6 or Deuteronomy 19 verse 15, it will all speak to us about the requirement of 2 witnesses, at least 2 witnesses for the justification of any cause. And here in this section, after performing this sign of healing a person on the Sabbath, after speaking about his authority which is given to him by the Father, Jesus will bring forth the witnesses to him. No, witnesses, not just 2, but he would speak about God himself as his witness. Look at verse 32, verse 37, he will say, God is my witness. Again, in verse 33 and 35, he will mention about John the Baptist as his witness. Again, in verse 36, he will speak about his own works are witnesses to him. And in verse 39, he will speak about the Old Testament, the scriptures is bearing witness to him. And finally, in verse 39, he will speak about Moses bearing witness to him. And when he says Moses, it is the Pentateuch bearing witness to him. And so Jesus is showing forth his credibility by bringing forth all these witnesses. And so, dear friends, let us read this particular chapter, chapter 5, wherein we have this miracle, this sign that Jesus performs, the third sign, wherein the authority of the Son is very clearly brought forth, the authority that is given by the Father, and then Jesus would speak about witnesses to him.